Hey guys, welcome back to Honkai Star Rail. In today's video, we're doing a Jing updated tier list. Now, I've waited a long time for this because I wanted to wait until I got to level 80 myself with some of my characters, so other people get there. Tested out Jing completely maxed out, tested him at E0, which is where the tier lists normally rank him at, just to get a vibe for where I think he will fall. And I want to talk about the rest of the tier list and some changes that I would personally make to it. Also, before we get into it, we did hit 115,000 subscribers, so we will be doing a giveaway in this video. $100. Basically, be subscribed, leave a comment, and then you'll go into the draw. We'll draw it in a community post about a week away. We already have another giveaway going already as well, so we've got two going on. But the tier list, we're going to jump into the Pride Win tier list and talk about it, and talk about, like I said, some changes I would personally make now that I've seen and tested a lot more things. So, first of all, this tier list was put together based on characters at level 70. Now, like I said, waited until we got to level 80, so it hasn't been adjusted for that. And we're looking at E0 for 5-star characters and E2 to 3 for 4-star characters. Now, I think once we hit E4 range, which I'll probably do another tier list on in the future, once maybe in the next patch we'll consider like some E4 values, but some characters get a massive buff with E4 where we look at the 4 stars and stuff like that. So let's jump in and talk about this tier list. The first one I'm obviously going to talk about is Jing Yuan because he's the new addition here. Now, keep in mind, I'll mention some changes that I personally would make, but take them with a grain of salt because, you know, bias is always going to be a thing in tier lists. So as always, take them with a massive grain of salt. But Jing Yuan, in my opinion, I think he is the second best splashable everywhere damage dealer in the game. But then you got something like Yang who absolutely dominates him in Memory of Chaos, because this is what tier lists are mainly about, is Memory of Chaos, because it's the only real challenging content in the game once you've got like a steady simulated universe team. If you want a simulated universe team, just use Trailblazer 5, March 7th, and Natasha. Any DPS you want, go Preservation, and you're pretty much good to auto through the whole thing. You may struggle early on, but once you get some more of the talent tree sorted out, you're perfectly fine. So that's why we look at Memory of Chaos for this. And Jing, he's got real solid AoE damage, which is good for clearing waves, real solid single target damage as well. He's a bit finicky. This rotation of Memory of Chaos kind of sucks for him. The buff, even though it does buff him, it makes him lose his buffs more often, which means the Lightning Lord doesn't have it up as often. So he's a bit tricky in that sense. But in general, I just think he's a good overall unit. I know there's been a lot of complaints from like CN and stuff, and players like upset that they pulled him. At the end of the day, if you're pulling a DPS, if it's not the best DPS in the game, I feel like there's always going to be those kinds of complaints. And I think Zilla is just more suited to the game at the moment than Jing. My thoughts around Jing is that he was built for end game, when you're like full rosters of level 80 characters, off the charts like gear. I feel like that's when it's his time to shine, when you're running at hyper carry stage, where he can just one-shot an entire wave, then you get to a single target enemy and he does massive nukes on the single target enemy and wipes them out. Like I feel like that's where his spot is, whereas at the moment in Memory of Chaos, players are still trying to use like healer, defensive support, offensive support, and Jing, and it's not enabling him, and the gear for people isn't at the place where it enables him to use his playstyle. That's my personal feelings around him. I think he's just going to get better with time, but I could be wrong with that. I just think he is still a fantastic unit. Like I said, I think he's the second best DPS in the game when we ignore enemy weaknesses. Once you add in weaknesses, once again, if they're weak to ice, Yang absolutely dominates. The other thing is, with Zilla, at the moment in the game, Quantum Break, Quantum Imaginary, and Ice Break are like the most valuable ones, because we're still working through. We're still not geared to the teeth. We're still playing a bit more defensive, and those three that provide basically defensive support with their break. Quantum obviously slows the enemy or reduces their turn, reduces their gauge. Ice freezes, and then Imaginary reduces gauge and also has the slow. So these three types of break are fantastic for survival, whereas something like Physical has higher damage output, but that's not what most people are looking for at this stage. So just a bit of a reference for why Zilla, Yang are so valuable at this stage of the game. Plus Yang has massive break potential, same as Zilla, all that stuff. But Jing Yuan as a solo damage unit, when we look at his break potential, if they are weak to lightning, it's huge. He's got massive AoE. He's got immense amounts of break on single target with his Lightning Lord. everything like that. So I think S is a great place for him. I know there's been a lot of complaints around him, but I think he's okay. So let's go through the rest of the tier list. Zilla, obviously, this S tier, still, I have no problems with this. This 100% makes sense. Best damage dealer in the game, in my opinion. Best support in the game. I do think there's some situations in which Bronya is not the best. For instance, if you are using Jing, she doesn't work as well with him. You'd rather bring a Ting. But in general, yeah, best splashable support, in my opinion. Best healer, best defensive shielder, and that pretty much covers that S tier. It just makes sense. Now, Clara in here, I love Clara. So Clara is in here as a tank at the moment, but the great thing about Clara is you build her as a tank, you build her with defensive stats so that she can taunt enemies, or not full taunt, but increase her aggro with the Svarog ultimate, and she basically gets hit. She revenges, so she does a good physical break with the revenging. She does okay damage with it, and she just tanks a lot of hits. And then you can run her with Yang Qing, and you don't need the Japad, provided there's no raw AoE in the team, and she can basically protect Yang Qing if he's on the opposite side. That's what I sometimes do on my free-to-play account. It works really well. But the cool thing about Clara is that then as you get better gear, you get further into the game, you get higher levels, higher level Lycones, more traces, you can actually switch and start putting more offensive gear on her so that she still does the tanking, but then deals more damage as your stats start to weigh up more. So that's the thing I really like about Clara. She's used as a tank, but then you can adjust for where your account's at to make her more of a damage dealing tank than a tanking tank, if that makes sense. I really like it. I think Clara's amazing for that. Yang Qing, like we spoke about, really good damage, really good break potential. Like the follow-ups do massive break. He can really break bars on ice weak enemies, and like I said, he's got the freeze from his follow-up that he can proc. Also, he's got the freeze from his break, which is great for survival in the game with where we're at the moment. Ting, obviously great unit, not much needs to be said. Fantastic buffer in just about any team. She can be used with a toolkit to, you know, use her ult to buff up your healer, to get your heals up earlier if you're in a defensive situation. She's very versatile, great unit. Welt, once again, another defensive type unit. He's got imaginary break, which is fantastic. He's also got all the slows. Now, the one thing with Welt is he doesn't speed up your cycles because he slows the enemies, not the cycles, but still fantastic support. His ult has the increased damage taken by the enemies, which is also great offensive pressure, and he can do a decent bit of damage as well on top of that. So, Welt, just an all-round great unit. Natasha, second healer in the game, only one at the moment until Locha comes in, so she just sits there. She will get power cracked massively in the future, I think, personally, but we'll have to wait and see. And Trailblazer Fire, fantastic unit. Now, I had a couple friends message me about the Fire Trailblazer, saying like they didn't. They're like, why is the Fire Trailblazer so good when the shield isn't so big? For me, the value in the Fire Trailblazer is not the shield itself; it's the situational taunt, which can be very clutch. And then it's the fact that you normally just basic attack with this thing, but because the way the whole passive works with the enhanced basic attack, you're getting the break and you're getting the value of a skill out of the basic attack a lot of the time. And then the ultimate has really good break potential as well. So you're getting a skill point positive unit that does give a little bit of mitigation, situational taunt if you need it, but also really good break potential, which I think is huge in this unit, and just a fantastic unit all around. Now we jump into the A tier. Now, the one unit that I would bring up into A tier, and I think she's a high A tier, is a Qingcui or Qingcui. I always hate saying her name, but I definitely think she's up there. We spoke about how Quantum is like the best break at the moment, and even without her at E4 she becomes cracked, and then at E6 she becomes efficiently cracked. But I just think having her, if you don't have Zilla, she's just a fantastic quantum break unit. Now, I am very biased towards her. She's my favorite character in the game. It's an RNG playstyle. If you hate RNG playstyle, you're probably not going to like her. But the great thing with RNG playstyle is you can retry stages of Memory of Chaos until you get some decent RNG to get it to help. But in general, the thing I like about her and why I would put her up into A tier personally is that I just think she can play so depending on what your team needs. You can just play her as a basic attack spam until she gets her enhanced basic, and then she's a neutral on that. But you can play her as like a plussing DPS unit when your back's against the wall and you need to play more defensively. But then when you want to play more offensively, especially if you're in a defensive team with like, say, a healer, a defensive support, offensive support, and her, then once you're in the stage where, okay, I'm good again, she can then just soak up all those skill points to deal extra damage. So I think she's very versatile in her playstyle. Her damage is really really solid. She's a quantum break. She's got high single target potential, but also good AoE clearing. So I just think she's a fantastic unit all around. She is RNG, which means people can't calculate her too well in spreadsheets and stuff like that. So her exact damage potential can't really be measured against other units, but I think it's fantastic, and I would personally put her up into the A tier. Now let's go through the rest of the A tier. One that I think could be in potential of going up, because we're looking at this at E2. Dan does have a good E2. So Vol has a great E2. I think Su Shang could be up, but maybe just like at the top of A tier, maybe not quite into an S tier. Because when we look at, I feel like Su Shang against physical weak enemies is just like a complete game changer, especially when we're considering this list to be E2, because at E1, she gets a bunch of refunds in her skill points. So I just think she's great. And like when we look at this being ranked for E2, she's probably still A tier, but like top of A tier. So Vol just completely suited to the lightning weak enemies that we have in Memory of Chaos, and she's just perfect for them. Like the big fat robot that summons the ads, she just claps them instantly. She's just fantastic for the point that you need her. Yes, Jing is a better overall lightning unit, but for free to play who don't have Jing, so Volve just does the role so well on what she's needed for. Hook is great. My problem with Hook is that, especially for free-to-play accounts, if you've built Asta and you've built Fire Trailblazer, you've got an immense amount of Fire Break. So Hook just isn't a high priority for me because it's sort of like condensing too much into that Fire element. I'd rather make sure I have the other elements covered. You know, Ching Chui for Quantum, Dan for Wind, Soval for Lightning, Su Shang for Physical, and then you've always got the break of Asta and Trailblazer if you have them built to cover that sort of weakness. Yes, Hook is a great unit, a great fire damage dealer, but for me, I just think it's not my top priority because I've already got Fire Break really covered. And both of these units do great amounts of Fire Break. So nothing gets hooked. It's just like, for me, for free to play especially, it's hard for me to justify building the hook that early, especially if you've already built Trailblazer Fire and Asta. So that's just my thoughts around that. And Dan, obviously, just amazing for wind units. Now, I want to quickly touch on Sampo and Himiko. These two, I think, will definitely get better in different rotations of Memory of Chaos. Sampo, obviously, when Kafka comes around, I think Sampo is going to be definitely up tiers because Kafka is probably going to be one of the top tier units, and he's going to be a key unit to pair with her. So I think he's definitely going to have his place. Even right now, I think he's fantastic, especially if you get to E4 when he can start dealing more just raw damage. But at the moment, I do think Dan is the better option if you can't get to E4. For a lot of situations, Dan's just more targeted. But if you do have one enemy that's just weak to wind, Sampo just shreds it. So it's really nice. Himiko, I think if we get in the next rotation of Memory of Chaos, if we get those, the deer that summons the trees, if that becomes a thing, I think Himiko definitely goes up a tier because she's going to specialize in those fights. She's going to get a lot of break on those things. She's going to proc her passive a ton, and she's going to deal a ton of damage. So I think she does have her place coming. I just don't think she's quite suited to this rotation at the moment. Let's go through the supports. Asta and Pella. I personally like Asta more than Pella a little bit. Just because I feel like neutral element, I feel like they're pretty even. But when it's Fire Weak, I feel like Asta's stronger than Pella against an Ice Weak enemy. Now, Pella's really shines, obviously, when you have something that you can strip to really help your team out. But Asta against fire enemies is just so good because you can justify using her skill, which then also means you're getting her ultimate up more, which is just all round a good thing. So these two, I definitely think same tier, but I think against Fire Weak, Asta's got the bread over Pella against Ice Weak. Personally, that's just from my testing playing with both of them, especially as a free-to-play. When we look at Asta being able to fill that breaking role as well as the offensive supporting role, I really like it, whereas Pella is more of just that offensive supportive role. Yes, she can play defensively with the strip and stuff like that, but in general, that's just my thoughts around those two. Still both fantastic units in my opinion. March 7th, great for free-to-play. Free-to-play, if you don't have Bailu and Jetbard, you're still building March, and she's putting in serious work. On my 4-star only account, March is just like absolutely amazing. She can be the solo defense. She can keep a shield up on 3 teammates consistently. Yes, it's skill point hungry, but if you're trying to just survive rounds, she can do it. If you don't have a healer, like, you've got to do what you can do. So she's fantastic. Moving on from that, Arlen, just damage isn't high enough. That's pretty much sums up Arlen. He just needs a number increase and then he'd just go up. He literally just goes up with the way they scale his numbers, and that's about it. Physical Trailblazer, honestly, I've seen a lot of things in early Memory of Chaos with Physical Trailblazer because he can heal in between the 2 battles. But once you get to stage 6, I think it is, and you start having just 2 3-wave battles, you don't get to make use of his technique and you can't get that heal, so it sort of falls off a lot. Plus, I don't like the idea of investing into traces and a light cone specifically for this guy, when mostly you're going to be bringing the Fire Trailblazer. And then Herder, just not suited. I really do hope they bring the deer that summons the trees as an enemy so that you can so I can see someone run Himiko and Herder and get them to shine. Because if you haven't seen these two farming like a golden calyx, it's so satisfying. Like after the first turn, it's like second wave, Himiko passive, into Herder passive, everything dead. Himiko passive, Herder passive, everything dead. It's really satisfying. I think Herder's gonna get like some clutch videos out there of doing some cool stuff, but in general, you know, she just doesn't quite cut the cake. So that is gonna be it for this one, guys. That is the tier list with Jing updated. Don't forget to be subscribed and leave a comment. You'll go into the draw. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.